The bullet missed Felicity Brennan's head by 3 inches, and she did not flinch because she had learned years ago that showing fear only made things worse. She stood in the dusty street of Cannon City, Colorado, in the summer heat of 1878, watching her stepbrother reload his revolver with shaking hands. The townspeople had scattered when Jacob started shooting, leaving her alone in front of the general store with nowhere to run. This was the 3rd time this month he had come after her, drunk and furious about something she had or had not done. The specifics never mattered. She was the problem. She had always been the problem. "You ruined everything," Jacob shouted, his words slurred and venomous. "Ma should have left you in that orphanage where you belonged." Felicity's hands remained still at her sides, her dark blonde hair falling loose from its pins after a long day of work. She was 22 years old and had spent the last 14 years being reminded that she was a burden, an inconvenience, a mistake that her stepmother had made out of misplaced charity. She opened her mouth to respond, to try to calm Jacob down the way she always did, but the words died in her throat when a figure stepped between them. The cowboy was tall, broad-shouldered, and he moved with the kind of quiet confidence that suggested he had faced down worse things than a drunk man with a gun. He wore a dusty brown hat, a dark blue shirt rolled up to his elbows, and a gun belt that looked well used but not worn for show. His face was tanned from years under the sun, with strong features and eyes the color of creek water in spring. "That is enough," the cowboy said, his voice calm but carrying a weight that made Jacob pause. "Put the gun down." Jacob wavered on his feet, squinting at the newcomer. "This is none of your business, stranger. That is my sister, and I will do what I want." "Stepsister," Felicity said quietly, though she was not sure why she bothered to correct him. The distinction had never earned her any kindness. The cowboy did not look at her, keeping his attention fixed on Jacob. "I am making it my business. You are drunk, firing a weapon in the street and endangering everyone around you. Now put it down before someone gets hurt." Something in his tone must have penetrated Jacob's alcohol-soaked brain because he lowered the gun slightly, though his grip remained tight. "She does not listen. She never listens. Someone needs to teach her." "Not with a bullet," the cowboy said flatly. "Go home, sleep it off." For a moment, Felicity thought Jacob might actually shoot them both. His finger twitched on the trigger, his face flushed with rage and humiliation. Then the sheriff appeared at the end of the street, and Jacob cursed, shoving his gun into his holster and stumbling away down an alley. The sheriff, an older man with gray whiskers and a perpetually tired expression, shook his head. "That boy is going to kill someone one of these days," he muttered, not bothering to pursue Jacob. He glanced at Felicity with the same mixture of pity and exasperation she had seen her whole life. "You all right, Miss Brennan?" "I am fine," she said automatically. The sheriff grunted and walked away, apparently satisfied with that answer. Felicity stood there in the empty street, aware that she was shaking now that the danger had passed. She clenched her hands into fists, willing herself to stop, to pull herself together the way she always did. "Are you hurt?" She looked up at the cowboy who had finally turned to face her. Up close, she could see the concern in his eyes, and it startled her. People did not look at her like that. They looked through her, or at her with annoyance or with the vague discomfort of someone who knew they should help but did not want to get involved. "No," she said. "Thank you for stepping in. You did not have to do that." "Yes, I did," he said simply. He studied her face for a moment, and she resisted the urge to look away. "Does that happen often?" Felicity hesitated. The truth was complicated and embarrassing, and she had learned not to share it with strangers. But something about the way he asked, as if her answer actually mattered, made her tell the truth. "Often enough." He frowned, a deep line forming between his brows. "The sheriff does not do anything about it. Jacob is the son of a prominent family. I am just the girl his mother took in out of charity." She heard the bitterness in her own voice and tried to soften it. "It is complicated." "It seems pretty simple to me," the cowboy said. "Someone is trying to hurt you and no one is stopping him." Felicity did not know what to say to that. She wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly aware of how she must look dusty and disheveled in her faded calico dress, her hair falling around her shoulders. "I should get back to work." "Thank you again, Mr. Turner," he said. "Preston Turner. And you do not need to thank me for doing what anyone should have done." But they had not, she thought. No one ever did. She nodded, uncertain how to respond to his blunt kindness, and turned to go back into the general store where she worked 6 days a week for barely enough money to pay for the tiny room she rented above the milliner's shop. "Miss Brennan," Preston called after her. She paused and looked back. "If you need help, I am staying at the boarding house on 3rd Street. Room 7. "I will be fine," she said, because that was what she always said, even when it was not true. She did not see Preston Turner again for 3 days, though she thought about him more than she wanted to admit. She thought about the way he had stepped between her and danger without hesitation, as if protecting her was the most natural thing in the world. She thought about how he had looked at her, really looked at her, as if she was a person worth seeing. On the 4th day, he came into the general store. Felicity was restocking shelves in the back, standing on a wooden stool to reach the higher spots. She heard the bell above the door chime, and Mr. Garrett, the store owner, greet the customer in his usual gruff manner. She did not pay much attention until she heard Preston's voice asking for rope and ammunition. She climbed down from the stool, brushing dust from her skirt, and made her way to the front counter. Preston stood there in clean clothes, his hat in his hands, looking somehow both at ease and alert at the same time. When he saw her, something shifted in his expression, a warmth that made her chest feel tight. "Miss Brennan," he said with a small nod. "Good to see you." "Mr. Turner," she replied, pleased that her voice came out steady. "Are you finding everything you need?" "I believe so." He glanced at Mr. Garrett, who was wrapping his purchases in brown paper. "I am heading out to the Patterson Ranch tomorrow. They hired me on as a ranch hand." "That is good work," she said, meaning it. The Patterson Ranch was one of the larger spreads in the area, well run and respected. "They are fair employers." "So I heard." He paid for his goods, then seemed to hesitate. "I wonder if you might know where I could get a decent meal around here." "The boarding house serves food, but it is pretty grim," Mr. Garrett snorted. "Mrs. Henley's cooking could kill a man faster than a rattlesnake. Try the hotel restaurant, Turner. It is not fancy, but it is edible." "I appreciate that," Preston said. He looked at Felicity again, and she saw something in his eyes that made her pulse quicken. "Would you consider joining me for dinner, Miss Brennan? As a thank you for the recommendation." She opened her mouth to refuse automatically, but the words stuck in her throat. When was the last time someone had invited her to dinner? When had anyone treated her like she might be worth spending time with? "I do not finish work until 6, she heard herself say. 6 is perfect. I will meet you here if that suits you." Mr. Garrett made a small sound that might have been disapproval, but Felicity found she did not care. "Yes," she said. "That would be nice." Preston smiled, and it transformed his entire face, softening the hard lines and making him look younger. "I will see you at 6 then." After he left, Mr. Garrett gave her a long look. "You be careful with that one, girl. Cowboys are nothing but trouble." "He saved my life the other day," Felicity said quietly, returning to her work. "Maybe so. But men like that do not stay in one place long. You remember that." She did remember it. All through the rest of the afternoon, as she helped customers and swept floors and restocked shelves, she reminded herself not to get her hopes up, not to read too much into a simple dinner invitation. Preston Turner was just being kind. He probably felt sorry for her after witnessing Jacob's attack. This did not mean anything. But when 6 o'clock came and she stepped outside to find Preston waiting for her, cleaned up and holding his hat, she could not stop the small flutter of hope in her chest. They walked to the hotel together in the cooling evening air. Cannon City was situated in a valley surrounded by red rock formations and distant mountains, and the sunset painted everything in shades of gold and crimson. Felicity was painfully aware of Preston beside her, tall and solid and present in a way that made her feel both nervous and safe at the same time. "Have you lived here long?" Preston asked as they walked. 14 years, Felicity said. "Since I was 8. My parents died of fever and I was sent to an orphanage in Denver. Mrs. Brennan, my stepmother, came looking for a child to raise. She chose me." That was kind of her. Felicity did not answer right away. How could she explain that what had seemed like kindness had turned into something else entirely? That Mrs. Brennan had wanted a daughter who was grateful and obedient and perfect, and Felicity had failed to be any of those things. She meant well, she finally said, which was not quite a lie. Preston seemed to hear what she did not say, but it did not work out the way she hoped. "No," Felicity admitted. "I was not what she wanted. I asked too many questions, I read too many books, I had too many opinions, I was difficult. That is what she always said, difficult and ungrateful." "Or maybe you were just yourself," Preston said quietly, "and she wanted you to be someone else." Felicity stopped walking and stared at him. No one had ever suggested that before. Everyone in her life had agreed that the problem was her, that she needed to try harder, be better, cause less trouble. The idea that perhaps Mrs. Brennan had been wrong, that Felicity's fundamental nature was not a flaw to be corrected, was so foreign that she did not know how to respond. "I am sorry," Preston said quickly. "I should not have spoken out of turn." "No," Felicity said, finding her voice. "No, it is just that no one has ever said that before." They resumed walking, and Felicity felt something shift between them, a deepening of connection that both thrilled and terrified her. The hotel restaurant was small but clean, with checkered tablecloths and the smell of roasted meat and fresh bread. They sat at a corner table, and Preston ordered for both of them beef stew and biscuits and coffee that was strong enough to strip paint. Felicity could not remember the last time she had eaten in a restaurant. It felt strange and wonderful and slightly overwhelming. "Tell me about the ranch," she said, partly because she wanted to know and partly because she wanted to turn the conversation away from herself. Preston seemed happy to oblige. He told her about the Patterson Ranch, about the cattle and horses, about the vast stretches of land that bordered the mountains. He talked about his work as a cowboy, moving from ranch to ranch, following the seasons and the need for labor. He had been born in Texas, orphaned young like her, and had learned to ride and rope and survive on his own. "It is a lonely life sometimes," he admitted, stirring his coffee. "But it is free. I answer to myself mostly, go where I want, work when I want. No one telling me I am not good enough or that I should be something other than what I am." Felicity heard the echo of her own experiences in his words. "That must be nice," she said softly. "That kind of freedom." "You do not have it," she laughed, though there was no humor in it. "I have never had it. First the orphanage, then the Brennans. I work 6 days a week at the general store, and I live in a room barely big enough for a bed. Everything I do, someone has an opinion about. The way I dress, the way I talk, the books I read. Mrs. Brennan says I will never find a husband if I do not learn to be more agreeable." Maybe you do not need to find a husband, Preston said. Maybe you need to find yourself first. Felicity looked down at her hands, calloused and rough from work. I do not think I am allowed to do that. Why not? Because I am a woman. Because I am poor. Because I have no family, no prospects, no future beyond what someone else decides to give me. She heard the desperation in her voice and tried to rein it in. I am sorry. You invited me to a nice dinner, and here I am complaining. You are not complaining, Preston said firmly. You are telling the truth. There is a difference. Their food arrived, and they ate in comfortable silence for a while. The stew was rich and savory, the biscuits buttery and warm, and Felicity realized she was hungrier than she had thought. When was the last time she had eaten a proper meal? She usually made do with bread and cheese in her room, too tired after work to do more. You said you read books, Preston said after a while. What kind? Felicity felt her cheeks warm. Everything I can get my hands on. Novels, mostly. Mr. Garrett lets me borrow from his wife's collection sometimes. I just finished Jane Eyre. Preston's face lit up with recognition. I read that a few years back. A rancher's wife lent it to me. I liked it. Jane reminds me of you a little. How so? She does not let anyone make her feel small. She knows her own worth, even when no one else does. Felicity felt tears prick her eyes and blinked them away quickly. I wish I had that kind of courage. I think you do, Preston said. You are still here, still working, still surviving. That takes courage. They talked for over an hour, long after their plates were empty and the coffee pot had been refilled twice. Felicity found herself sharing things she had never told anyone, about her dreams of traveling, of seeing places beyond Cannon City, of being more than just a burden or a problem. Preston listened with an attention that made her feel valued in a way she never had before. When they finally left the restaurant, the sky was dark and filled with stars. Preston walked her back to the milliner's shop, moving slowly as if reluctant for the evening to end. Thank you for dinner, Felicity said when they reached her door. I enjoyed it very much. So did I. Preston hesitated, then said, I would like to see you again if you would allow it. I know I am leaving for the ranch tomorrow, but it is only about 5 miles out of town. I could ride in on Sunday if you are free. Felicity's heart was pounding so hard she was sure he could hear it. I would like that, she said. Preston smiled that transforming smile again, and Felicity felt something warm and bright bloom in her chest. Sunday, then. I will meet you here at noon. Noon, she agreed. She watched him walk away into the night, her hand pressed against her chest where her heart still raced. For the first time in as long as she could remember, she felt something other than resignation. She felt hope. Sunday came slowly. Felicity worked through Saturday in a daze, her mind constantly wandering to Preston Turner and the way he had looked at her, really looked at her, as if she mattered. Mr. Garrett noticed her distraction and grumbled about it, but even his complaints could not dampen her mood. On Sunday morning, she woke early and took extra care with her appearance. She had only 2 decent dresses, and she chose the better of them, a simple blue cotton that brought out the color of her eyes. She braided her hair and pinned it up carefully, then looked at herself in the small cracked mirror above her wash basin. She looked like herself, nothing special, but perhaps that was enough. Preston had seemed to like her as she was. She was ready by 11, too nervous to sit still in her tiny room. She went downstairs and waited outside the milliner's shop, watching the street and trying not to let her anxiety show. What if he did not come? What if he had changed his mind? What if she had misunderstood everything? But at 5 minutes to noon, she saw him riding down the street on a sturdy bay horse. He dismounted smoothly and tied the horse to the hitching post, then turned to her with that smile that made her feel warm all over. Miss Brennan, he said, touching the brim of his hat, you look lovely. "Thank you," she managed, feeling her cheeks flush. "How was your first week at the ranch?" "Hard work, but good. The Pattersons are decent people." He glanced up at the clear blue sky. "I thought we might take a ride if you are comfortable on a horse. There is a place I found that I think you would like." Felicity had not been on a horse in years, but she nodded. "I would like that." Preston had brought a second horse, a gentle mare with kind eyes. He helped Felicity mount, his hands steady and respectful, then swung up onto his own horse. They rode out of town at an easy pace, heading toward the red rock formations that surrounded the valley. The air was warm but not oppressively hot, and the landscape was beautiful in a harsh, honest way. Preston led them along a trail that wound between the rocks, climbing gradually until they reached a plateau that overlooked the entire valley. Cannon City spread out below them, small and dusty, with the Arkansas River snaking through the landscape like a silver ribbon. "This is beautiful," Felicity breathed, turning in her saddle to take it all in. "I thought you might like it," Preston said. He dismounted and came to help her down, his hands on her waist strong and warm. For a moment they stood close together, and Felicity felt her breath catch. Then Preston stepped back, giving her space, and she both appreciated and regretted his courtesy. They sat on a flat rock and looked out over the view. Preston had brought a canteen of water and some dried apples, which he shared with her. They talked easily, picking up their conversation from dinner as if no time had passed at all. "What made you want to be a cowboy?" Felicity asked. Preston considered the question, his eyes on the distant mountains. "I suppose I wanted to be useful. After my parents died, I was passed around between relatives who did not really want me. I was just another mouth to feed, you know. But on a ranch I could work, I could contribute, I could prove that I was worth something." "You were always worth something," Felicity said quietly. "Even before you could work." Preston looked at her, something vulnerable in his eyes. "Maybe, but it did not feel that way. I needed to earn my place in the world, still do, I suppose." "I understand that," Felicity said. "I have spent my whole life trying to earn my place, trying to be good enough, useful enough. It never seems to work, though. No matter what I do, I am still just a problem to be managed." "You are not a problem," Preston said with sudden intensity. "You are a person, Felicity. A smart, brave, interesting person. Anyone who cannot see that is a fool." Hearing him use her given name sent a shiver through her. "You barely know me," she said, though she wanted desperately to believe him. "I know enough. I know you have survived things that would have broken other people. I know you still have dreams even when everyone around you tries to crush them. I know you are kind and honest and real." He paused, then added more softly, "And I know I would like to know you better if you will let me." Felicity felt tears sting her eyes again. No one had ever spoken to her this way, with such plain sincerity. "I would like that too," she whispered. They sat together on that rock for hours, talking about everything and nothing. Preston told her about the places he had been, the ranches he had worked, the vast open spaces of Texas and New Mexico and Colorado. Felicity told him about the books she had read, the world she had explored in her imagination when reality became too hard to bear. They discovered they both loved thunderstorms and hated crowds, that they both felt most peaceful in wild places far from other people. When the sun began to sink toward the western horizon, Preston reluctantly suggested they head back. They rode slowly, neither of them eager for the day to end. When they reached the milliner's shop, Preston helped Felicity dismount, his hands lingering on her waist for just a moment longer than necessary. "Can I see you again?" he asked. "Next Sunday?" "Yes," Felicity said immediately. "Yes, please." "I will count the days," Preston said, and from the way he looked at her, she believed him. The following week passed in a blur. Felicity worked her usual long hours at the general store, but her heart felt lighter than it had in years. She caught herself smiling for no reason, humming under her breath as she restocked shelves. Mr. Garrett gave her strange looks but did not comment. On Wednesday evening, as she was walking back to her room after work, she encountered Mrs. Brennan on the street. Her stepmother was a tall, severe woman with graying hair pulled back in a tight bun and a mouth that seemed made for frowning. She looked Felicity up and down with disapproval. "Felicity, I heard you have been seen with a cowboy." Felicity felt her stomach tighten but kept her voice level. "His name is Preston Turner. He works at the Patterson Ranch." "I know who he is. A drifter with no family and no prospects." Mrs. Brennan's lips thinned. "You are making a spectacle of yourself again." "We went riding," Felicity said. "That is hardly a spectacle. People are talking. They are saying you are chasing after a man who will never marry you. They are saying you are making a fool of yourself." "Let them talk," Felicity said, surprising herself with her boldness. "I do not care what they think." Mrs. Brennan's eyes narrowed. "You should care. You have no family, no money, no position. Your reputation is all you have. If you ruin it by consorting with a worthless cowboy, you will have nothing." "I already have nothing," Felicity said quietly. "You made sure of that." "How dare you?" Mrs. Brennan hissed. "After everything I did for you, taking you in, feeding you, clothing you, this is the gratitude I receive." "You took me in because you wanted a grateful little doll to dress up and show off," Felicity said, years of suppressed anger finally breaking through. "When I turned out to be a real person with thoughts and feelings of my own, you decided I was defective. You have spent 14 years telling me I am not good enough, that I am difficult, that I am a disappointment. Well, maybe you are right. Maybe I am all of those things. But at least Preston sees me as a person, not a problem to be fixed." Mrs. Brennan's face flushed with rage. "You are ungrateful and foolish. When that cowboy breaks your heart and leaves you ruined, do not come crying to me." "I would never come to you for anything," Felicity said, and walked away before her stepmother could respond. She was shaking by the time she reached her room, but underneath the fear and anger, she felt something else. She felt free. For the first time in her life, she had stood up for herself, had spoken her truth without apologizing or backing down. It was terrifying and exhilarating at the same time. That night, she lay in bed and thought about Preston. Was she being foolish? Was she setting herself up for heartbreak? Maybe. But even if nothing came of this, even if Preston eventually moved on to another ranch in another town, these feelings, this sense of being seen and valued, were worth it. For the first time in her life, someone treated her like she mattered. That was not nothing. Sunday came around again and Preston was waiting for her right on time. He looked tired, his face more tan than before, but his smile when he saw her was bright and genuine. "Hard week?" Felicity asked as they walked to where the horses were tied. "Long days," Preston admitted, "but worth it. The Pattersons are pleased with my work. Mr. Patterson said I am the best hand he has hired in years." "That is wonderful," Felicity said, meaning it. She was happy for him, but there was a small part of her that worried. If Preston was such a valuable worker, would the Pattersons want him to stay? Would he be willing to settle down? Or would the call of the open range be too strong? They rode out to a different location this time, a spot along the Arkansas River where cottonwood trees provided shade and the water ran clear and cool. They spread a blanket Preston had brought and sat together, watching the river flow past. "I met my stepmother this week," Felicity said after a while. "She heard about us." Preston's expression grew serious. "What did she say?" "That you are a worthless drifter with no prospects and I am making a fool of myself." Felicity plucked at the grass beside the blanket. She thinks you will ruin me and leave me with nothing." "And what do you think?" Preston asked quietly. Felicity looked at him, at his honest face and steady eyes. "I think I would rather have these few weeks or months with you, being seen as a person, than spend the rest of my life being treated like a problem by people who are supposed to care about me." Preston reached out and took her hand, his calloused fingers warm and strong around hers. "Felicity, I need you to know something. I am not playing games with you. I am not looking for a brief distraction. When I look at you, I see someone I could build a life with." Her heart stuttered in her chest. "Preston, we have only known each other 2 weeks." "I know. And I am not asking you to decide anything right now. I am just telling you where I stand. You are not a problem to me. You never will be. You are the first person I have met in a long time who makes me want to stop drifting and start putting down roots." Felicity felt tears spill over and did not bother to wipe them away. "I do not know what to say." "You do not have to say anything," Preston said gently. He lifted her hand and pressed a kiss to her knuckles, a gesture so tender it made her chest ache. "Just let me keep seeing you. Let me prove to you that you deserve to be treated well." They spent the rest of the afternoon by the river, talking and laughing and learning more about each other. Preston told her about his dreams of eventually owning his own small ranch, a place where he could raise horses and cattle and live on his own terms. Felicity shared her secret hope of maybe one day teaching, of helping children who felt as lost and unwanted as she once had. As the sun began to set, they rode back to town. But when they reached the outskirts, they saw smoke rising from the center of Cannon City. Preston urged his horse forward, and Felicity followed, her heart pounding with sudden fear. The general store was on fire. Flames licked up the sides of the wooden building, and a crowd had gathered, passing buckets of water in a desperate attempt to save it. Felicity dismounted and ran forward, her first thought for Mr. Garrett. She found him standing at a safe distance, his face blackened with smoke but otherwise unharmed. "What happened?" she gasped. "Lantern got knocked over," Mr. Garrett said, his voice hoarse. "I tried to put it out, but it spread too fast." Preston appeared at Felicity's side, already rolling up his sleeves. "I will help," he said, and joined the bucket brigade without waiting for a response. For the next 2 hours, Felicity worked alongside Preston and dozens of others, hauling water from the town well and passing buckets down the line. The heat was intense, the smoke choking, but they kept at it. By the time they got the fire under control, the store was a charred ruin, but the buildings on either side had been saved. Felicity sat down hard on the ground, exhausted and covered in soot. Preston collapsed beside her, breathing hard. Around them, other people were doing the same, too tired to move. "It is gone," Mr. Garrett said, staring at the smoking remains of his store. "Everything is gone." Felicity felt her stomach drop. The store was gone, which meant her job was gone. She had barely enough money saved to pay next month's rent, and no prospects for new employment. In a town the size of Cannon City, jobs were scarce, especially for women. Preston seemed to read her thoughts. He reached out and took her hand, squeezing it gently. "We will figure something out," he said quietly, but Felicity could not see how. She was back where she had always been, with nothing and no one, a problem without a solution. The next few days were grim. Mr. Garrett announced he did not have the money to rebuild, and would be leaving Cannon City to stay with his daughter in Denver. He paid Felicity her last week's wages, apologizing profusely, and left on the Wednesday stage. Felicity spent those days looking for work, but there was nothing. The hotel did not need anyone, the saloon would not hire a respectable woman, and the other stores were fully staffed. She felt panic rising as her small savings dwindled. She would not be able to pay rent for much longer. What would she do then? Where would she go? On Thursday evening, there was a knock at her door. She opened it to find Preston standing there, his hat in his hands. "I heard about your situation," he said. "Can I come in?" Felicity hesitated, aware that having a man in her room was improper, but she was too tired and worried to care. She stepped back and let him in. Preston looked around the tiny space, taking in the narrow bed, the small wash basin, the single chair and tiny table that comprised her entire living space. His face tightened with some emotion she could not read. "Felicity, I have been thinking," he said carefully. "The Pattersons need someone to help with the house. Mrs. Patterson is getting older, and the work is getting to be too much for her. They asked if I knew anyone who might be interested. It would mean living at the ranch, with room and board plus a small wage." Felicity felt a flicker of hope. "Do you think they would hire me?" I already asked. "Mrs. Patterson said she would be happy to meet with you. I told them you were honest, hardworking, and trustworthy." He paused, then added, "I did not tell them about us. I thought that should be your decision." Felicity sat down on the edge of her bed, her mind racing. Moving to the ranch would solve her immediate problems. She would have work, shelter, and food. But it would also mean living in close proximity to Preston, and she was not sure if that was wise. What would people say? What would happen if things did not work out between them? "What are you thinking?" Preston asked gently. "I am thinking that I do not have much choice," Felicity admitted. "I cannot afford to stay here and there are no other jobs, but I am also thinking that this complicates things between us." "It does not have to," Preston said. "The Pattersons are good people. They would not stand for any impropriety. You would have your own room in the house and I stay in the bunkhouse with the other hands. We would see each other, but no more than we do now." "And what happens when you decide to move on to another ranch?" Felicity asked, voicing her deepest fear. "What happens to me then?" Preston knelt in front of her, taking both her hands in his. "Felicity, look at me," she did, meeting his serious green eyes. "I told you before I am not looking to drift anymore. I want to build something with you. I know it is fast, and I know you have every reason not to trust that. But I am asking you to give me a chance to prove it. Come to the ranch, take the job, and let us see where this goes. If I am wrong, if this does not work out, the Pattersons will still need help and you will still have a position. You will not be left with nothing." Felicity wanted to believe him so badly it hurt. "You really mean that?" Every word. She took a deep breath and made her decision. "All right." "When can I meet Mrs. Patterson?" Preston's face broke into a relieved smile. "Tomorrow, if you can. I will take you out there." They rode out to the Patterson ranch the next morning. The spread was impressive, with a large main house, several barns, corrals, and a bunkhouse. Cattle grazed in distant pastures, and horses moved lazily in a nearby paddock. Everything looked well maintained and prosperous, a testament to years of hard work. Mrs. Patterson met them on the porch. She was a stout woman in her 60s with steel gray hair, sharp eyes, and a no-nonsense demeanor. She looked Felicity up and down, then nodded approvingly. "You look strong enough," she said bluntly. "Preston says you are a hard worker. That true?" "Yes, madam," Felicity said. "I worked at Garrett's General Store for 5 years. I can cook, clean, sew, and manage accounts if needed." "Can you handle livestock?" "I grew up around animals at the orphanage. I am not afraid of hard work or getting dirty." Mrs. Patterson nodded again. "Good." "I need help with the house, the garden, and the chickens. Sometimes I need help in the kitchen when we have extra hands for roundup or branding. Room and board, plus $15 a month. That sound fair?" $15 was more than Felicity had made at the store. "Very fair, madam." "All right then. You can start Monday. Preston will bring you out. I will have a room ready for you." Mrs. Patterson glanced between them, her sharp eyes missing nothing. "I will say this once. I do not care what is or is not happening between you two as long as it does not interfere with work. This is a respectable household. I expect respectable behavior. Understood?" "Yes, madam," Felicity and Preston said in unison. "Good. Now come inside, girl. Let me show you around." Felicity spent the next hour getting a tour of the house and meeting Mr. Patterson, a quiet man with kind eyes and a weathered face. She learned what would be expected of her, saw the room she would be staying in, small but clean with a real window that looked out over the mountains, and felt her anxiety begin to ease. This could work. This could actually work. Preston was waiting for her when she finished, leaning against the porch railing and talking to one of the other ranch hands. When he saw her, he straightened, searching her face. "So?" he asked. "I start Monday," Felicity said, unable to keep the smile off her face. Preston's answering smile was brilliant. "That is wonderful." They rode back to town, Felicity feeling lighter than she had in days. She had a future now, uncertain as it might be, and she had Preston. For a girl who had spent her whole life being told she was a problem, that felt like a miracle. She moved to the Patterson ranch on Monday morning with all her worldly possessions packed into a single carpet bag. Mrs. Patterson put her to work immediately, and Felicity threw herself into her tasks with gratitude. The work was hard but satisfying, and Mrs. Patterson, while strict, was fair and occasionally even kind. Living at the ranch meant seeing Preston every day, though they were both so busy that they rarely had more than a few minutes to talk. Sometimes he would find her in the garden and help her pull weeds for a few minutes before returning to his own work. Sometimes they would pass each other in the yard and exchange smiles. Sometimes, in the evening after dinner, they would sit on the porch together and watch the sun set behind the mountains. Those moments became precious to Felicity. Preston never pushed for more than she was ready to give, but his affection was clear in every look, every smile, every casual touch of his hand on her shoulder as he passed. Slowly, carefully, she felt herself falling in love with him. 6 weeks after she started working at the ranch, Preston asked her to walk with him after dinner. They strolled away from the house, out toward the pastures where the cattle grazed in the fading light. The air was cooling as autumn approached, and Felicity wrapped her shawl more tightly around her shoulders. "I have been thinking," Preston said as they walked, "about the future, about what I want." Felicity's heart began to beat faster. "What do you want?" Preston stopped and turned to face her. In the golden light of sunset, he looked almost unreal, too good to be true. "I want to buy a piece of land. Nothing huge, just enough for some horses and cattle. I have been saving my wages, and I think in another year I will have enough for a down payment. Mr. Patterson said he would help me look for something nearby." "That sounds wonderful," Felicity said, meaning it. "I want to build a house on that land, a real house with a big kitchen and a porch and enough room for a family." Preston took a deep breath. "And I want you to be there with me, Felicity, as my wife." Felicity felt her breath catch. "Preston, I know it is fast," Preston said quickly. "I know we have only known each other a few months, but I am sure about this. I am sure about you. You are the most amazing person I have ever met. You are strong and smart and brave, and you make me want to be better. I love you, Felicity. I think I have loved you since that first day when I saw you standing in the street, refusing to show fear even with a gun pointed at you." Tears were streaming down Felicity's face now. "I love you too," she whispered. "I did not know I could feel this way about anyone, but Preston, are you sure? I come with nothing. No family, no dowry, no connections, just me. Just you is everything," Preston said fiercely. He took her hands in his. "Felicity, you have never been a problem. You have only been yourself, and that is all I want. Will you marry me? Yes, Felicity said, laughing and crying at the same time. Yes, yes, yes. Preston pulled her into his arms and kissed her, and it was like coming home. Felicity wrapped her arms around his neck and kissed him back, pouring all her love and hope and joy into that moment. When they finally pulled apart, both breathless, Preston rested his forehead against hers. I will make you happy, he promised. I swear I will. You already have, Felicity said. They married in October, in a simple ceremony at the small church in Cannon City. Mrs. Patterson insisted on hosting a party at the ranch afterward, and to Felicity's surprise, many of the townspeople came. Even some people who had ignored her for years suddenly acted friendly, though she suspected that had more to do with Preston's growing reputation as an excellent ranch hand than with any change of heart about her. Mrs. Brennan and Jacob did not attend. Felicity had sent them an invitation out of a sense of obligation, but she was relieved when they did not show up. That part of her life was over. After the wedding, Preston and Felicity moved into a small cabin on the edge of the Patterson property that Mr. Patterson said they could use rent-free while they saved for their own land. It was tiny, just 2 rooms and a loft, but it was theirs. For the first time in her life, Felicity had a home. The first few months of marriage were an adjustment. Felicity was used to being alone, to keeping her thoughts and feelings to herself. Learning to share her space and her life with someone else was strange, but Preston was patient. He seemed to understand when she needed quiet and when she needed to talk. He never made her feel like a burden. For his part, Preston was learning to stay in one place. He had spent his adult life drifting, and Felicity could see that sometimes he got restless, that his eyes would turn to the distant mountains with a familiar longing. But he always came back to her, always chose to stay. And gradually, that restlessness faded, replaced by contentment. They worked hard through that first year, saving every penny they could. Felicity continued to help Mrs. Patterson, and Preston took on extra work during roundup and branding season. In the evenings, they would sit together and plan their future, talking about the house they would build and the animals they would raise. In the spring, Felicity discovered she was pregnant. She told Preston one evening as they sat on the porch of their tiny cabin, watching the stars come out. I have news, she said, her heart pounding with nervousness and excitement. Preston turned to look at her. Good news or bad news? Good news, I think, I hope. She took his hand and placed it on her still flat stomach. We are going to have a baby. For a moment, Preston just stared at her, his eyes wide. Then his face broke into the widest smile she had ever seen, and he let out a whoop of joy that probably woke half the ranch. He picked her up and spun her around, then set her down carefully as if she were made of glass. Are you sure? He asked, his hands on her shoulders. As sure as I can be. I missed my courses and I have been feeling sick in the mornings. Preston kissed her deeply, then knelt down and pressed a kiss to her stomach. Hello in there, he said softly. I am your father, and I already love you more than I thought possible. Felicity felt tears spring to her eyes. She ran her fingers through Preston's hair, overwhelmed by the love she felt for this man, for the life they were building together. The pregnancy was not easy. Felicity was sick for the first few months, and the summer heat was oppressive. But Preston was attentive and caring, always making sure she rested when she needed to, and never complaining when she was too tired or uncomfortable to do much. Mr. and Mrs. Patterson were thrilled about the baby and insisted that Felicity stop doing heavy work. Mrs. Patterson, in particular, became almost motherly, giving Felicity advice and telling stories about her own children, now grown and living in other states. In August, Preston came home with news. I found it, he said, his eyes shining. The perfect piece of land. It is about 3 miles from here, 50 acres with a creek running through it and a good stand of trees. The owner is willing to sell for a fair price, and Mr. Patterson said he would loan us the rest of what we need. Felicity felt her heart soar. Can we see it tomorrow? I will take you there tomorrow. They rode out the next day, Felicity going slowly on her gentle mare, careful of the baby. When they reached the property, Felicity understood immediately why Preston loved it. The land rolled gently, with good grass for grazing and the creek providing reliable water. The trees would offer shade and lumber for building, and the view of the mountains was spectacular. What do you think? Preston asked anxiously. I think it is perfect, Felicity said. I think it is home. They bought the land in September, signing the papers in the land office with Mr. Patterson as witness. It was one of the proudest moments of Felicity's life, seeing her name, Felicity Turner, on an official document as a landowner. She was no longer just a problem or a burden. She was a wife, soon to be a mother and a woman with her own land. Their daughter was born in November during the first snowfall of the season. The labor was long and difficult, and there were moments when Felicity was sure she would not survive. But Mrs. Patterson, who had assisted at dozens of births, was calm and efficient, and Preston stayed by her side the whole time, holding her hand and whispering encouragement. When the baby finally came, tiny and red-faced and wailing, Felicity felt a surge of love so powerful it took her breath away. Preston cradled the baby in his large, careful hands, tears streaming down his face. She is perfect, he whispered. She is absolutely perfect. They named her Alina Rose Turner, and she became the center of their world. Felicity had worried that she would not know how to be a mother, that she would somehow ruin this innocent child the way everyone always said she ruined everything. But Preston would not let her think that way. You are a wonderful mother, he told her on one of those long, sleepless nights when Alina refused to settle. Look at her. She is healthy and happy and loved. That is all because of you. It is because of both of us, Felicity corrected gently. Then we make a good team, Preston said and kissed her forehead. Winter passed slowly but peacefully. In the spring, as soon as the weather warmed, Preston began building their house. He worked on it every moment he could spare, with help from some of the other ranch hands and even Mr. Patterson himself. Felicity would bring Alina out to the site in a basket and watch Preston work, marveling at the way their dreams were taking shape in wood and stone. The house was finished by summer, a sturdy 2-story structure with the big kitchen and porch Preston had promised. It was not fancy, but it was solid and well built, a home that would last. They moved in on a warm July day, carrying their few possessions across the threshold together. That night, after they had put Alina to bed in her new room, Preston and Felicity stood on their porch and looked out at their land, their home, their future. You remember the first time we met? Preston asked, his arm around Felicity's waist. I remember thinking you were either very brave or very foolish, stepping between me and Jacob, Felicity said. I was both, Preston admitted, but I could not just stand there and watch. You looked so small and alone, but you were not afraid. You were magnificent. I was terrified, Felicity confessed. I am still terrified sometimes, terrified that this will all disappear, that I will wake up and find it was just a dream. Preston turned her to face him, his hands on her shoulders. This is real, Felicity. You are real, I am real, Alina is real, and this life we have built is real. You are not a problem, you never were. You were just waiting for someone to see you as a person, and I am so grateful I got to be that someone. Felicity felt tears spill over, but they were happy tears. I love you, Preston Turner. I love you, Felicity Turner, and I am going to spend the rest of my life making sure you know it. Over the next few years, their family grew. Another daughter came, then a son, then another son. The ranch prospered. Preston's skill with horses became well known, and people came from all over the region to buy his stock. Felicity started a small school in the front room of their house, teaching the children of neighboring ranchers and farmers. It was exactly what she had dreamed of all those years ago in Cannon City. Sometimes, on quiet evenings when the children were in bed, Felicity would think back to the girl she had been, standing in that dusty street with a gun pointed at her, feeling like nothing and no one. It seemed like a lifetime ago, like it had happened to someone else. She was not that girl anymore. She was a wife, a mother, a teacher, a landowner. She was respected in the community. People asked for her advice, valued her opinions. She was no longer a problem to be managed. She was a person, and people saw her as such. But more than any of that, she was loved. Deeply, truly, completely loved by Preston Turner, the cowboy who had been the first to see her not as a burden or a problem, but as a person worth knowing, worth protecting, worth building a life with. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Preston surprised her with a gift. It was a small wooden sign that he had carved himself, with elegant letters burned into the wood. Turner Ranch, it read. Established 1879. Home of Preston, Felicity, Eleanor Margaret James, and Samuel Turner. For the gate, Preston explained. So everyone who comes here knows that this is our place, our home, built on love. Felicity traced the letters with her finger, her throat tight with emotion. It is perfect. They hung the sign together, the whole family gathering to watch. The children clapped and cheered, not fully understanding the significance but caught up in their parents' joy. Preston put his arm around Felicity and she leaned into him, feeling the solid strength of him, the unwavering love that had transformed her life. "Thank you," she said softly. "For what? For seeing me, for loving me, for showing me that I was never the problem, I was just waiting for the right person." Preston kissed the top of her head. "I was waiting for you too, I just did not know it until I found you." As the sun set over their land, painting the mountains in shades of gold and purple, Felicity thought about all the years ahead, all the moments they would share, all the love that still waited to be lived. She had started with nothing, had been told her whole life that she was difficult and ungrateful and broken, but Preston had shown her the truth. She was not broken. She had never been a wife before him because she had been waiting for a marriage based on mutual respect and love. She had only been seen as a problem by people who wanted her to be something she was not. Preston had loved her exactly as she was, had seen her as a person from the very first moment, and that had made all the difference. Their oldest daughter, Eleanor, now 9 years old, came to stand beside them. She had Felicity's dark blonde hair and Preston's green eyes, and she was already showing signs of her mother's intelligence and her father's determination. "Mama, Papa, are you happy?" She asked with the directness of childhood. Preston and Felicity looked at each other and smiled. "Yes, sweetheart," Felicity said, taking her daughter's hand. "We are very happy." And it was true. Despite everything she had endured, despite all the years of feeling unwanted and worthless, Felicity had found her way to happiness. She had found her home, her family, her purpose. She had found Preston. She had found herself. The years continued to unfold with a steady rhythm of seasons and celebrations. Eleanor grew into a thoughtful young woman who loved books as much as her mother, often helping Felicity teach the younger children in their small school. Margaret was wild and free-spirited, preferring to be outside helping Preston with the horses. James was quiet and serious, already showing an aptitude for working with numbers and managing the ranch accounts. Samuel, the youngest, was all mischief and laughter, keeping everyone on their toes. Preston expanded the horse breeding operation, earning a reputation throughout Colorado for producing reliable, well-trained stock. Ranchers came from as far as Denver to buy from him. The Turner Ranch became known not just for quality horses, but for the integrity of the people who ran it. Felicity's school grew as well. What had started with just 3 or 4 children now regularly saw a dozen students, and she had to expand the classroom into a separate building that Preston and some neighbors built together. She taught reading, writing, arithmetic, and history. But she also made sure to teach her students that they were valuable, that their thoughts and opinions mattered, that they could be whoever they wanted to be. Sometimes children came to her who reminded her of herself at that age, children who had been told they were problems, who felt unwanted and unworthy. Felicity always gave those children extra attention, made sure they knew they were seen and valued. More than once, Preston came home to find some stray child eating at their table, having been invited by Felicity to stay for dinner because she sensed they needed kindness. "You are going to adopt half the county," Preston teased gently, though his eyes were warm with approval. "I just remember what it was like," Felicity said. "To feel invisible. If I can make even one child feel less alone, then that is worth it." Preston pulled her into his arms. "This is why I love you. You have the biggest heart of anyone I have ever known." On a crisp autumn day in 1888, a decade after their wedding, Felicity received a letter that she had not expected. It was from an attorney in Cannon City, informing her that Mrs. Brennan had passed away. As her legal daughter through adoption, Felicity was entitled to a small inheritance. She stared at the letter for a long time, feeling nothing at first. Then, slowly, a complicated mix of emotions rose up. Sadness for the relationship that could have been but never was. Relief that she would never again have to face that disappointed frown or hear those cutting words. And finally, closure. "Are you all right?" Preston asked, reading over her shoulder. "I think so," Felicity said. She folded the letter carefully. "She was not a kind woman, but she did give me a home when I had none. I suppose I should be grateful for that much." "What about Jacob?" Felicity had not seen or heard from her stepbrother in years. "The letter does not mention him. I hope he found some peace. He was not a happy person." They traveled to Cannon City to settle the estate. The inheritance was modest, some furniture and household goods and a small sum of money. Felicity donated most of it to the orphanage where she had spent the first 8 years of her life. The money she kept, she put toward expanding the school. Walking through Cannon City again after so many years was strange. The town had grown, but it was still recognizable. The hotel where Preston had taken her to dinner that first night still stood. The milliner's shop where she had rented that tiny room was still there, though under new ownership. The site where Garrett's General Store had burned was now occupied by a new building, a dress shop run by a woman Felicity did not know. "Do you miss it?" Preston asked as they walked through the familiar streets. "No," Felicity said without hesitation. "This is where I survived, but the ranch is where I live. There is a difference." They stopped by the church before leaving town. Felicity wanted to visit the small cemetery behind it to see her stepmother's grave. It was not sentiment exactly, more a need for closure, to acknowledge this chapter of her life before closing it for good. The grave was simple, with a plain stone marker. Felicity stood before it for a long moment, Preston a steady presence beside her. "I forgive you," Felicity said quietly. "You did not know how to love someone who was different from what you expected. I understand that now. I hope you found peace." As they rode away from Cannon City for the last time, Felicity felt lighter, as if she had set down a burden she had been carrying for years. The past was the past. Her future was ahead of her, bright and full of promise. The seasons continued their steady march. The children grew, each developing their own personalities and dreams. Alina fell in love with a young man who worked at a neighboring ranch, a kind fellow with a good head on his shoulders. Preston approved, though he made sure the young man understood that Alina was precious and should be treated accordingly. The wedding was held at the Turner Ranch on a beautiful June day in 1891. The whole community came, filling the house and spilling out into the yard. Felicity watched her daughter stand before the minister, radiant in a simple white dress that they had sewn together, and felt her heart overflow with joy and bittersweet nostalgia. "She is so grown up," Felicity whispered to Preston as they watched Alina and her new husband exchange vows. "She is," Preston agreed. His arm tightened around Felicity's waist. "We did well, you and I. All our children know they are loved. That is the best gift we could give them." Felicity thought about her own wedding, that simple ceremony all those years ago. She thought about the girl she had been, uncertain and afraid, hardly daring to hope that happiness was possible. And she thought about the man who had shown her that she deserved love, that she had never been the problem, that she had always been enough exactly as she was. "I love you," she said, turning to press a kiss to Preston's cheek. "Thank you for everything you have given me." "Thank you for choosing me," Preston replied, "for trusting me, for building this life with me." As Alina and her husband were pronounced man and wife, the crowd erupted in cheers and applause. The celebration lasted well into the night, with music and dancing and laughter echoing across the ranch. Felicity danced with Preston under the stars, the same stars that had watched over them through all these years, and felt profoundly grateful for every moment, every challenge, every triumph that had brought them to this place. The years that followed brought more weddings, as Margaret and then James found partners of their own. They brought grandchildren, tiny perfect beings that filled the house with noise and joy. They brought challenges too, hard winters and drought years, illness and injury and loss. But through it all, Preston and Felicity faced everything together. Their love the bedrock on which their family was built. On their 25th wedding anniversary in 1903, their children and grandchildren gathered at the ranch for a celebration. The house that Preston had built was now weathered and comfortable, expanded over the years to accommodate their growing family. The land that had been raw and empty was now established, with fences and outbuildings and herds of cattle and horses. Samuel, now a young man of 22, stood to make a toast. "To my parents," he said, raising his glass, "who taught us that love is not just a feeling but a choice you make every day. Who showed us that where you come from does not matter as much as where you are going. Who built something from nothing and made all of us possible. To Preston and Felicity Turner, the best parents anyone could ask for." Everyone drank to that, and Felicity felt tears streaming down her face. Preston pulled her close, kissing her temple. "Look at what we made," he murmured. "Look at this family, this life. Do you remember when you told me you felt like you would never have anything?" "I remember," Felicity said. "I was so wrong. I have everything." As the party continued around them, Preston led Felicity out to the porch, to the spot where they had stood so many times over the years. The sun was setting behind the mountains, painting the sky in brilliant colors. The land stretched out before them, their land, their home, the physical manifestation of their love and hard work. "I want you to know something," Preston said, taking both her hands in his. "You saved me just as much as I saved you. Before I met you, I was drifting, never settling, never letting anyone get close. I thought that was freedom, but it was just loneliness. You gave me a reason to stay, to build, to become more than just a wandering cowboy. You made me want to be better." "You were always good," Felicity said. "You just needed someone to see it." "And you needed someone to see you," Preston replied. Really see you, not as a problem or a burden, but as the amazing woman you are. I am so glad I got to be that person. I am so glad you let me love you." Felicity reached up and cupped his face in her hands, looking into the green eyes that had been her anchor for over a quarter of a century. "I am glad, too. You were the first person to make me feel like I mattered, like I was worth something just as I was. You gave me myself, Preston. That is the greatest gift anyone has ever given me." They kissed, sweet and slow, as the sun sank below the horizon and the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. Inside the house, their family laughed and talked and celebrated, a testament to the love that had started with two lonely people who found each other in a dusty street in Cannon City. The years continued, bringing more changes. Preston's hair turned silver, and Felicity found lines around her eyes and mouth, markers of a life well lived. Their children had children, and those children began to have children of their own. The Turner Ranch became a fixture in the community, known for quality livestock, fair dealing, and the warm hospitality of its owners. Felicity continued teaching almost until the end of her 70s, finally retiring when her eyesight began to fail and the long days became too tiring. By then, she had taught hundreds of children, some of whom came back to visit as adults, bringing their own children and thanking her for the education and kindness she had shown them. "You changed my life," more than one former student told her. "You made me believe I could be more than what people expected." Those moments made every struggle worth it. In the summer of 1918, Preston and Felicity celebrated their 40th wedding anniversary. They were both in their 70s now, moving slower but still active, still engaged with the ranch and their family. The celebration was enormous, with children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren filling every corner of the house and yard. Samuel, who now ran the day-to-day operations of the ranch, stood to make another toast. 40 years, he said, his voice carrying across the crowd. 40 years of partnership, of love, of showing the rest of us what a marriage should look like. Mama, Papa, you built more than a ranch. You built a legacy. Every one of us here is a testament to your love. Thank you for everything you have given us." The applause was thunderous. Preston and Felicity stood together, surrounded by the fruit of their love, and Felicity felt her heart might burst with happiness. That night, after everyone had gone to bed or headed back to their own homes, Preston and Felicity sat together on their porch, wrapped in blankets against the cool mountain air. They did not talk much, did not need to. After 40 years together, words were often unnecessary. "Do you have any regrets?" Preston asked eventually. Felicity thought about it carefully. She thought about the hard years in the orphanage, the difficult years with the Brennans, the fear and uncertainty of her youth. She thought about the challenges of building a ranch and raising a family, the sleepless nights and the moments of doubt. "No," she said finally. "Not one. Even the hard times led me here to this life. I would not change a single thing." Preston squeezed her hand. "Neither would I." "You have made me happier than I ever thought possible, Felicity Turner. And you made me feel like a person when everyone else made me feel like a problem. That changed everything." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars wheel overhead, the same stars that had witnessed their first kiss, their wedding, the births of their children, every important moment of their life together. The ranch was quiet around them, peaceful and prosperous, a lasting monument to what could be built on a foundation of love and respect. As autumn arrived and then winter, Preston's health began to decline. He had lived a hard life, years of demanding physical labor taking their toll. But he faced this final challenge with the same steady courage he had faced everything else. Felicity nursed him tenderly, rarely leaving his side, holding his hand through the difficult nights. "I am not afraid," Preston told her one evening as the snow fell softly outside their window. "I have lived a good life, a full life. I have loved and been loved. What more could anyone ask for?" "Stay with me a little longer," Felicity whispered, though she knew it was selfish. "I am not ready to let you go." "You are the strongest person I know," Preston said, his voice weak but certain. "You will be all right. Our children will take care of you and you will have the memories, all those beautiful memories we made together." "I love you," Felicity said, tears streaming down her face. "I have loved you since that very first day. You saved me, Preston." "We saved each other," Preston corrected gently. He lifted a trembling hand to cup her cheek. "Promise me something. Anything. Promise me you will remember that you were never the problem, that you are amazing and strong and worthy of love. Do not forget that after I am gone." "I promise," Felicity whispered. Preston Turner passed away peacefully 3 days later, surrounded by his family, his hand held tightly in Felicity's. He was 76 years old and had lived to see his children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren thrive. His last words were, "I love you, Felicity, always." The grief was immense, a physical weight on Felicity's chest, but even in her sorrow she felt gratitude. She had been loved, truly and deeply loved, by a man who had seen her for who she really was and had chosen her every single day of their marriage. Not everyone got that. Many people lived their whole lives without experiencing that kind of love. At Preston's funeral, held on a clear winter day with the mountains standing stark and beautiful against the blue sky, Felicity stood strong. Their children surrounded her, offering comfort and support, but she did not break. Preston would not have wanted that. He would have wanted her to celebrate their life together, to remember the joy instead of dwelling only on the loss. After the service, as people gathered at the ranch to share memories and food, Alina found her mother standing alone on the porch, looking out at the land that she and Preston had built together. "Are you all right, Mama?" Alina asked gently. Felicity considered the question. Was she all right? Her husband was gone, the love of her life, her partner of over 40 years. The pain of that loss was enormous, but she was also surrounded by family, by love, by the legacy they had built together. She had lived a life she could be proud of. She had gone from being a girl everyone called a problem to a woman who had made a difference in her community, who had raised good children, who had loved and been loved. "I miss him," Felicity said honestly. "I will miss him every day for the rest of my life. But Alina, I am also so grateful. Your father gave me everything. He was the first person to see me as a person, not as a burden or a mistake. He loved me for exactly who I was. That changed my whole life. Because of him, I became the person I was meant to be. Because of him, I have all of you. So yes, I am all right." "I am sad, but I am all right." Alina hugged her mother tightly. "He loved you so much, we all do." "I know," Felicity said. "And that is everything." Felicity lived for another 8 years after Preston's death, years filled with the love of her family. She was blessed to meet several more great-grandchildren and even one great-great-grandchild before the end. She spent her days quietly, reading, doing small tasks around the ranch, visiting with children and grandchildren who came by frequently to check on her. She never remarried. How could she, when she had already experienced the great love of her life on warm summer evenings? She would sit on the porch in her rocking chair, wrapped in one of Preston's old shirts that still somehow smelled like him, and remember. She remembered that first day in Cannon City, when a stranger had stepped between her and danger. She remembered dinners and rides and long conversations under the stars. She remembered building their house, raising their children, weathering storms both literal and figurative. She remembered 40 years of partnership, of being seen and valued and loved. And she remembered Preston's words, spoken over and over throughout their marriage. "You are not a problem. You are a person. You are amazing and worthy and loved." Those words had sustained her through everything. They had given her the strength to become the woman she was meant to be. And even now, with Preston gone, they still gave her strength. Felicity passed away peacefully in her sleep in the late summer of 1926, at the age of 78. She died in the house that Preston had built for her, surrounded by memories of their life together. Her last thoughts were of him, of the cowboy who had been the first to make her feel like a person, who had loved her so completely that it had transformed her entire existence. At her funeral, Samuel stood to speak about his mother. "My mother had a hard start in life," he said. "She was told she was difficult, that she was a problem, that she would never amount to anything, but my father saw the truth. He saw her strength, her intelligence, her capacity for love. And because he saw her that way, she was able to see herself that way. Together, they built something beautiful. This ranch, our family, the school that educated so many children, the legacy of kindness and integrity that we all strive to live up to. My mother was never a problem. She was a solution, an inspiration, a gift to everyone who knew her. And my father was wise enough to recognize that from the very beginning." They buried Felicity next to Preston on a hill overlooking the ranch, their headstones standing side by side just as they had stood side by side in life. The inscription on Felicity's stone reads simply, "Beloved wife, mother, teacher, friend. She was never a problem. She was always a person." The Turner Ranch continued for generations after them, passed down through their children and grandchildren. The house Preston built still stood, expanded and updated but fundamentally the same. The land they had worked so hard to cultivate remained productive and beautiful. And the story of Preston and Felicity, of the cowboy and the girl everyone called a problem, became a family legend, told and retold to new generations. It was a story about love, yes, but it was also a story about seeing people as they truly are, about recognizing worth where others see only burden, about the transformative power of being truly seen and valued. It was a story about how one person's compassion can change another person's entire life. And it was a story with a happy ending, because Preston and Felicity had found each other in that dusty street in Cannon City, and they had chosen each other every day after that, building a life and a love that lasted long past their lifetimes, echoing through the generations in the family they had created together. She had never been a wife before him, because she had been waiting for a marriage built on true partnership and respect. She had only been seen as a problem by people who wanted her to be something she was not. And he had been the first, the only one that mattered, to make her feel like a person. That had made all the difference. That had been everything. Their love story became part of the landscape of Colorado, as enduring as the mountains, as constant as the changing seasons, a testament to the power of seeing and being seen, of loving and being loved, of two souls who found each other against all odds and built something beautiful that would last forever.